Hello and welcome finally to episode 4 of Chunky Tea and Friends. The reason I haven't done that many videos recently is because I started the project at the back end of the first lockdown, and then with returning to work and all that, it just became manic and I just didn't have as much time for it because my workload was like doubled. Luckily, well, unfortunately, we're in a second lockdown, so you get to see more of my face, and I've been able to do a few more interviews. I did have a couple that were meant to come out pre-lockdown, but the files were corrupted, which was even more of a ball ache. But luckily, we're here, episode 4. This week, or this episode, I have the man behind Suitably Odd, which is Tom Hardman. And I had an awesome chat with Tom. I've known him for a little while now, and he's just captivating. It's odd. It's suitably odd. Like, couldn't have worded that better. But yeah, I could just sit and listen to him talk for hours about literally anything. And he's got some really cool creative stuff on the go, a lot of D&D stuff, and he really thinks outside the box and quite, I don't know, three-dimensionally, shall we say. But yeah, so here it is. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and all that. And don't forget to check out Tom's stuff. Here it is. This is my chat with Tom Hardman of Suitably Odd. Yeah, sweet. How we doing then, mate?
Pretty good, thank you. Yourself? Yeah,
not bad, mate. You been keeping busy?
Yeah, strangely. Yeah, quite a lot to do. I mean, a lot of it's self-generated. A lot of it's, I keep finding things to do. But no, stuff keeps going. So, keep me bit by bit.
Oh, that's good. How's the lockdown treated you generally then?
Well, I guess not too bad.
Yeah.
I've in terms of like what it is I do, it's put restrictions in, but generally speaking, pretty good. My partner and I have actually kind of enjoyed it. We've had a lot of woes and things, but there's a certain aspect of when it's not your fault and there's literally nothing you can do about it. You do your best, you get by, you pay the bills as best you can and everything, and that from like an anxiety point of view, it's actually really quite nice.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we've done all we can today, so I guess we've just got the rest of the day together. We actually enjoy each other's company. So
yeah, I think that's a big bonus for partners. I think, isn't it? Like,
definitely.
A lot of people have realised, I don't like you, and I live with you.
Yeah, I think one way or another, this year has certainly been an eye opener, but from a lot of perspectives. So
yeah. So generally then, like, have you just been milling around like permanently then, or how did your lockdown sort of
go? We kept ourselves entertained. We had a few kind of little events and bits and pieces. For the first kind of like for that crunch time of the lockdown where everybody was being told you've got to stay indoors and people were, suddenly realizing they didn't have enough food in and they didn't know what to do with themselves. That point where it was early on, I ran some online quizzes and things. I ran online games for people. I just found that I had the time and setup and ability to be able to start putting on entertainment of some sorts of people, kind of keeping people occupied, giving themselves something to look forward to.
Yeah.
That was really good fun. I enjoyed doing it. Quickly realized that I'm always a bit of a perfectionist for stuff like that, but I got a decent pub quiz, like 100 questions or so. It might take a couple of hours to run, but it will take like 12 hours to put together. Yeah. And I have a newfound appreciation for anybody who does that.
Yeah, it is quite a bit of effort, to be fair. Like we did a food for the Utopia project, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm glad I'm not at work because this is a full-time job, man.
Yeah. There was definitely a point during the pandemic when I was looking at everything I was doing, and I was trying to see opportunities to play things a little bit smarter, do a little bit more kind of productive stuff towards my own sort of personal goals and aims, things like that. And I found I was doing more than I would have been doing had the pandemic not been running. And maybe in some respects it was because people were more available and people were actually reaching out and saying, I want something to do. And I was there waiting for them effectively. But it kind of went okay. So and still it's going okay, actually, because we're not really through it yet, are we? And there's certain aspects of, not everybody's back in work. Not everybody has sort of gone back to where they were before all of this kicked off. And so things like at the moment, there's certain things I can't do with regards to what it is I do for a living. So,
Well, speaking of that, do you want to just give me a bit of an overview of what you do? Because to be fair, I've known you for the best part of 2 years now, and I still don't really know. Like, I know you obviously you do like your Dungeon Master, and you got the Suitably odd stuff.
Yes, yep.
But I mean, as someone, and we've had this conversation before, where you've gone, "Oh, you should come along and we'll do a one shot, see what you reckon, and all this," and I'm like, I have not got the time to get sucked into that hole. And like, I know for a fact I'll be one of these people that I'll come for one and I'll be like, right, every day, let's do it. Like, do you want to just give a bit of a brief? Well, try explain it to me a bit, like what Dungeons and Dragons and stuff.
There's definitely different tiers of explanation. If someone says, "What do you do for a living?" It's quick and easy to say, "Oh, I'm a dungeon master." Obviously, like, some people read into that. They're not exactly sure what it is. So you have to kind of explain a little bit.
Are they a bit 50 Shades of Grey? Is that the first thing?
Yeah. You can put on a business card and hand out freely. You've got to come up with like at least a 30-word explanation. So depending, and this is terrible, but depending on who it is I'm talking to, if it's a case of I've got somewhere to be, then I'll try and give them the quick explanation, which is, "Oh, I'm a storyteller." And I think that's probably a title I'm a little bit more comfortable with. Not that there's anything wrong with Dungeon Master, Games Master, etc. That's a bit more specific, but storytelling is really at the heart of what I enjoy doing. That's the bit that most people understand. A few people just presume that means I spend my time at a library telling stories to kids, and I'd love to do that. But
do you see yourself on CBBC bedtime stories?
Oh yeah, for like half an episode before I get kicked off. I start embellishing certain characters. I think my final words on there would be like, "Wait, I'm not allowed to swear." I'd love to do that.
Yeah, so storyteller is the title then.
I think so. Yeah, and this is something that, I mean, at the moment, every night, this is probably I wouldn't say it's too personal information, but I read aloud to my partner because I enjoy telling stories, even if they're written by somebody else. That's great. I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed doing that kind of creative. I'm not an artistic person. I can't draw. I can't paint. But I love the process. I love the sort of the epic tale, the different types of stories. I can't watch horror films.
Tell me about it, man. I'm not about that life.
But I love reading the synopsis for various kind of like horror stories. I love reading the scripts. I love kind of the effort and the work that goes into sort of those particular types of story, and so I'll try and emulate those in the ones I tell. And I've just got a real love for it. I think I can't help but watch a film and kind of pick apart the script mid-film, sort of thing. I'm pretty good at keeping that to myself, unless someone specifically asks for it. But it's storytelling is really where the heart of it is, and so that's kind of the wide picture. That's my input of what I, in terms of like what that actually looks like on a sort of pen and paper basis, a sort of what it is I'm actually delivering. I have multiple groups that are either like as you mentioned, one shots. They're kind of these individual single adventures. They typically run like shortages about 2 hours, typically run about 4 hours a piece. And beginning to end, it's like a little snapshot adventure, like a little tale of sorts. And then my bread and butter, what I really enjoy doing, is running the campaigns. And this is where I have a group of typically about 5 or so people, and they will start off as characters in a world that we sort of collaborate on telling a story with.
Yeah.
So these campaign groups can run for a long time. I think my longest running group at the moment that's still running has either just had their second year anniversary or was about to.
2 years.
Yes. They're still coming back. So
that's
they're enjoying themselves.
I mean, I've written the odd little, like, you know, for fun, sort of like comic strips and stuff like that. But to keep content up for 2 years,
yeah,
that's outstanding, mate. To be fair,
so it's obviously like I'm utilizing other material a lot of the time for some of these campaigns. There's pre-written material out there. There's also I'm not sitting down and pre-scripting everything in case of like I've got 2-3 year elaborate plan of what's going to happen to everybody, because one of the most important things about what I do is it's not down to me. It's like a threefold sort of relationship in some respects, but as far as the story is concerned, there's my narration and what I will choose to throw in their path. There is what the players, the characters themselves, our kind of main protagonists, will do to deal with those situations. And then there's the dice. There's always an element of luck involved.
Yeah.
Everything.
So how do the dice work then? Is that like a whether or not they'll get the right outcome of what they want to do within the game then?
Yeah. So my kind of the system I run the most is Dungeons and Dragons. I think pretty much everybody knows about it to some extent. It's the kind of classic fantasy tabletop role-playing game. Yeah. And there is, as far as the dice are concerned, what they do is they determine how successful you are as a character are in certain situations. Right. They can be used to denote randomized numbers of things, or what's inside that chest, or how many particular items you find in a certain location, or if something happens to you that day or not, etc. But for the vast majority of the time, it's always used to determine how successful you are at an action. And that action could be anything from are you able to pick the lock on this door to do you hit the person that's you're kind of swinging a sword at, for example? Yeah,
that's cool. How many dice are used then, or is that like just up to you or the players? Or
so it's kind of pre-scripted a number of dice depending on the action you're doing. The most I'd say the most used dice is called a D20. Right. And for anybody who dice are just cube things with 6 sides.
Up until about 2 years ago, mate, like when I first met your partner Bethan, and I was like, I was like, what?
There's off the top of my head like 5 or 6 different sort of dice we typically use as tabletop games, and most of them use a similar dice. They won't all use it for the same thing, but as far as Dungeons and Dragons is concerned, a D20, so the 20-sided dice, is used for the vast majority of things, because your character will have a certain, what we call a modifier, a plus or minus number that's when you roll the dice is added to that, and if it beats a certain number or doesn't beat a certain number, you know if the action was successful or not. And it's literally that simple. You roll this 20-sided dice, you add or subtract a number from it, you tell me, the DM, and I say you hit, you miss, you pick, or you pick that boulder up, whatever the case might be. Yeah. And all of the other dice are, for the most part, just used for damage. If you're swinging a sword at something, it might say this sword does 1d6 plus 2. That's literally your bog standard normal 6-sided dice. Roll it, add 2 to it. That's how much damage it does. Dungeons and Dragons from the outset looks pretty scary for a lot of people. Very maths based, a lot of numbers, a lot of references for things. But getting into it, it's surprisingly simple. When I start with beginners, I basically just say, yep, you don't really need to know the rules. I run like a little beginner workshops or little beginner adventures and things. And I'll say, here's your dice. Here's a little handy chart which shows you which shape dice is which. And all you need to do is pick up this dice when I say, roll it, add this number to it, tell me what it is, and I'll say what happens. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a sort of an improv sort of thing. You say whatever it is you want to do. I'll tell you to roll. I'll tell you if you're successful or not. Yeah.
So is there not like there's not like a winner or a loser then? It's just a case of like when you decide the campaign's over, or like how does that work?
It can vary. So first of all, not all characters. I was about to say not all players. I haven't killed anyone at the table yet. I have killed characters of theirs,
Right, okay.
but killed
Yeah.
the people behind them.
Yeah.
Not all characters will make it through to the end.
Yeah.
I believe that that's important because a lot of these campaigns, there are a lot of different genres, but at the end of the day, there is fighting, there is it's an adventure, there's combat, etc. And so for that to be of any worth, for it to actually work, there has to be the threat of not succeeding. And so people die, and when they do so, they can be brought back. It's fantasy world, but not always. That's not always the case.
Simple, yeah.
So the ending of the campaign can be in a situation where, okay, everybody's dead, and there's just no way of really picking up the thread of this. Rather than here's 5 fresh new people that just so happen to be in the same location, around about the same kind of like combat worthiness, etc.
Yeah.
Played in a similar manner, sort of thing. And normally that's a fairly weak kind of campaign.
Yeah.
The other way is, you just get to the end of where that story arc goes. Sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean the end of the group, because
I suppose you could pick that back up, couldn't you?
So this campaign that's somewhere near their 2nd year anniversary. This is actually their 2nd campaign that they're going through. They played for one campaign and said, "This is great. Our characters have developed. This is where we are now, and we would like to continue this story." And the story has kind of ended, but I'd threaded in sort of possible sequel material, so that when they came back and said, "Yes, we want to continue," almost a year later, actually over a year later, I think now, they are kind of still dealing with some of the stuff from almost 2 years ago. And they have seen this kind of personal growth through those characters where they can look back, and it's strange, but they reminisce about times that they had where they would literally just sit around a table as if it was real lives. And it's a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, which is like Bethan's told me before, because obviously I think you have your own group that you run with, your friend group, and she said before when the characters have died, it's been seriously emotional.
Oh yeah, I mean, so this is not all on me, but I do try and deliver a story where people care, because you're playing as these characters, so there's obviously a degree of role playing involved. Now, different players will take that to different lengths. Some will like to put on a voice. Some will like to kind of really kind of getting to their characters. I don't prescribe a certain amount of that at all. But one way or another, I try to make sure that people actually kind of give a damn. They feel for their characters. They might play a character that's very different from them. They might play a character that is just them, but with a ponytail and a sword. But whatever they choose to do, they should feel like there's something at stake, and that when a loss is felt, or even like moments of elation or sort of hilarity, they should be allowed to continue. I'll start a session, and I do this weekly, 4 hours at a piece for most of my groups. And I'll start a session with a sort of plan, possible directions they might go into, kind of plan for all the eventualities I can see. And the group will decide, without ever actually sitting down to say, hey, we need to decide what to do today. They will end up spending that 4 hours just drifting around a town, getting into bar fights, gambling, doing something because there was a point to it, and it made some sort of cohesive sense. But no one saw it coming, and it becomes one of those natural moments where actually, as far as progress on my list of objectives is concerned, no progress whatsoever was made. But it might be that it was full of memorable moments that a year and a half later they're still talking about. So that's what we're in it for, those kind of heartwarming moments.
I suppose as well, it's a bit like real life, isn't it? You don't remember. Oh, yeah. Some of the best things that you remember are the impromptu. One of my friends popped round and we ended up getting drunk and we ended up doing this, we ended up doing that, and it was never something you ever discussed or planned, and it just happened. So I suppose that reflects that as well.
It's and I get to witness this a lot, but I have this sort of, there's a second-hand effect which I'm witnessing more and more often these days, and I've learned to just keep quiet during it, and I think it's fantastic, where you have players sometimes from completely different groups, so their characters have never met. They don't even necessarily know each other very much, and they will be swapping tales between them as if it was them in some respects.
Yeah.
So they'll say, "Oh, there was this moment I did where," and they'll call someone else over. It's like, "Oh, can you remember when we did this thing?" And they'll talk about it, and you'll see somebody at whatever group is there that was not involved in this, doesn't know about D&D. There's just confused look on their face.
Yeah,
to say,
that's usually me.
like, what have you been doing in your spare time? And because like none of this is physically possible.
And I thought you worked at Starbucks. When did you do this?
So yeah, it's fantastic. And it's hard for me to say this because, like, for me, it's a big part of what I do. Obviously, it's kind of a profession as well as a hobby at the same time. But for others, based on what they've said, it's their highlight of the week is kind of sounds cheesy, but it's something that they're constantly looking forward to because you have these 4-hour intervals of kind of storytelling, and it's like picking where you play one of the main characters, and you have to put it down, and you have to wait a full week before getting back to it.
Yeah.
Like watching a film.
It's like some sort of weird TV series, but a book, but a story. But yeah.
So, and I do have a habit of ending like an episode, ending a session on some sort of cliffhanger, if I can. You know, something to kind of tease what might be happening the next week, or something where it's a case of they want to sit down and have a conversation about what was just revealed, but they can't. They have to wait a week.
Yeah.
So anything I could do to kind of draw out that feeling that they've got to come back, they've got to do these things, and it's a tricky process to kind of deliver on that consistently. But again, it's not all me; it's as well. I do have this. I think any dungeon master, games master, etc. They develop their own rules over time, and we put a lot of focus on the actual system rules, the physical rules that determine what dice we roll when and what we add to them, etc. Aside from that, we have our own ways of running the game. So I have my own personal flavor that I enjoy running in games in that manner, and I see the pros and cons of it. One of the things is that I'm pretty detailed. I love the description. I love getting into things. So when I've run content that other people have run, they've said, "Oh, it took us 3 months." I'll be like, "Well, we're on month 8." And I've not really added that much content to it. It's just the way in which they've gone about doing it. Yeah. So some people aren't into that. They just want to like head into a dungeon and just roll dice all the time and kill the way as quickly as possible. I'm in it for that kind of story moments where in between us fights, they're chatting and things. I'm not enforcing that. I'm just hopefully where that seems like the logical nice thing to do. And it comes into this kind of mantra of cooperative storytelling. So yes, I'm the person with all the notes, all the different kind of gadgets and features and all the sorts of things that I've got to run these sessions, but I cannot do it alone. I need them to not just develop their own characters, but to take cues from other players. So that if I say, okay, well, you're on the road to this town, it's 2 days travel, it gets dark, what do you want to do? Okay, you want to set up camp next to the side of the road, that's fine. Okay, how are you going to handle like the night? You're just going to pitch tents, sleep it off, get up in the morning? All right, you want to take a watch order, that's fine. So we know how long you've got to rest for. So they might say, well, we'll split up into different watch orders. And the first watch might be, okay, well, we'll take the first watch, the two of us. And well, I could just say, all right, roll some dice, see what happens, move on, etc. And sometimes that's what happens because you've got a game plan for what you want to fit into a session. Other times, the next 15 minutes might be these two characters having a heart-to-heart away from the rest of the group. Like where we get to see a bit of a dynamic between how those two characters work. Because most of the time, it's 5 or 6 of them all kind of tackling things as a mass group. We don't really get too many private moments between them. Yeah. And that's not me. I can sit back and I can just listen to two players talk in character with one another. And it's fantastic. I can help kind of bring that environment to the table, but I need them to, as players, to be able to kind of like pick up the other end of the storytelling. So if they just said like, oh, I want to hit this one with a sword, and then I want to throw a javelin at this guy. That's great, and that's fine at the table, and people do that all the time. But if they want to start embellishing on that, I want to kick off the table, leap into the air, pull the longsword from my back, and try and thrust it down the throat of the goblin in front of me. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, we're going to be rolling exactly the same dice as we were anyway, but like now we've made it exciting. You've developed your character a little bit because apparently there's somebody who does things flamboyantly, and we've no sort of what might go wrong. So yeah, it's a cooperative sort of environment, and it's definitely something that by nurturing that, this is why we have groups running 2 years plus. And to be honest, they've got maybe I'm trying not to give them any clues because there's some of them watch this, but they've got maybe a year. It depends on what they do. They've got maybe a year on their campaign, possibly less than that. And already I've started to thread certain aspects into their campaign that they're running through now, because if they get to the end of this campaign and say, want to push on, then I can't just be like, book 3, here's all this stuff that was never mentioned in the first 2 books, kind of thing. I want to sort of thread some stuff in there so that when the third campaign starts, it feels like a continuation of the larger story, this saga that they're working through.
Yeah.
So I'm planning a year and ahead in some respects, and I'm planning, for the session an hour before sometimes, or halfway through the session, abandoning all the plans I have and just ad-libbing.
Yeah. I suppose, you never know if you're going to get thrown a curveball or anything like that. And you just got to, like you say, with it being improv, you've got to just think on your toes and go, right, we're doing that.
100%. In fact, that's one of the few things you can plan for is the fact that if you know that the party in the previous session was going down a road and up ahead there's a crossroads with 3 different directions, the party will find a 4th and set fire to a 5th. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
They will forge their own path, and I love it. It's fantastic. There's nothing better than putting a situation in front of them and watching a group of people, first and foremost, but they're playing through their characters. And so they're not just utilizing the mechanics that they have available to them. They're utilizing sort of the ingenuity or the kind of response that their characters would have. Yeah. And so sometimes, again, it's a fantasy adventure filled with all of the wonderful tropes and cliches. You put a riddled door in front of them, and one of them will say, I want to smash it down. That's an option that is open to you, because this isn't a game in as much that there is a rule set that says, here is the one thing you can do. You have to roll this dice, and you have to get over a certain amount. If you want to be creative with it, if you want to approach it from a different direction, then do so. Literally, the imagination is our only limitation. Yeah. And some pretty imaginative people as well. So
yeah, I suppose some people, you can take some quite good life skills away from doing that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Although you're not actually taking part in life, I suppose. Yeah. You can still kind of transfer that and learn a lot about yourself. I imagine a lot of people have revelations about their own personality a little bit.
Quite possibly, and I've certainly heard, for privacy's sake, I won't mention anyone specific, but I've certainly had people come forward to me and mention things. One of the things I do get more often than anything else, I think, is there's a lot of people who come into this mostly worried about their social skills. Because of social game. And they quickly develop friendships within the groups that I run. And I think this is true of most kind of tabletop groups for this reason as well. You do develop friendships pretty easily for it. You do develop friendships which have a backbone of something that, because it's not work related, because it's not it is linked to a hobby, but it feels like you're doing a variety of different things.
Yeah.
You get to suss people out a little bit better. How they play their character definitely gives you some insight into kind of player's mind a little bit. And so you feel like through knowing that other person's character, you kind of know them quite a bit as well. And so there's definitely a higher degree of trust amongst people that may have been strangers a couple of months ago, but they're willing to kind of go out of the way to help one another. So it's really nice seeing that, kind of seeing groups form around just a shared interest in playing a fantasy game, and then coming out of it with new developed relationships.
Yeah.
So that happens quite a bit, and I think it's, as long as the environment itself is welcoming, and that's something I'm always 100% keen on doing. There is within, still to this day, unfortunately, there is within sort of the community at large, there have been issues with, if not elitism, then sexism as well.
Right.
A few kind of problems where, because Dungeons and Dragons, like typically it's a boys thing, and it's done in a basement.
Yeah.
Like the two, and like by Satan worshippers. Like there's the
yeah. I suppose there's always going to be a cliche in there.
Yeah, we well, since like the Satanic Panic, there was a lot of people who still to this day actually don't really have much truck with tabletop gaming, especially Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, there's literally hundreds or thousands or so of other tabletop systems out of there, but Dungeons and Dragons is the one that's the most popular, and so it gets a lot of the most sort of generated heat towards it. And so when it happens, I think there are so many different types of people that I run sessions for. You cannot look at somebody these days and say, "Oh, yeah, they look like, they play Dungeons and Dragons. They look like kind of sat at a basement somewhere sopping." I mean, obviously I do, but but then this is all like a carefully orchestrated sort of costume, basically, to just put people at ease, just so they know that he's clearly a dungeon master. He's not been outside for a long time.
To be fair though, it's a lot more mainstream now, isn't it? Because like, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Like when I was at school, that sort of thing is like, oh, it's for nerds. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I know I was a pretty nerdy kid. Like,
I think it still is for nerds, but exclusively. Like, there's definitely a lot of people who find that, like, oh, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy building characters. I enjoy kind of the randomized nature of it, that element of luck. But if you enjoy storytelling, or if you enjoy being part of a story, then that's pretty cool. I think it's nice to be challenged with things that are fun. Yeah. That at the end of the day, you can pass or fail and still enjoy in some fashion. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. 100% right. It's definitely more mainstream. We've had so much exposure to Dungeons and Dragons specifically, but tabletop gaming in general has certainly seen a boon. But Dungeons and Dragons, since the 5th edition was released, we've had Stranger Things, I think, was a massive hit for it, because it was kind of showcased in that quite heavily, certainly in the first season. And since then, we've had more and more people kind of intrigued by it. The latest edition of Dungeons & Dragons, which has been out for a while now, I would say is the easiest to get into. It's tidied. It feels pretty robust. I think from a support perspective, they're going to keep on pushing this 5th edition further and further, which means that more and more people are getting into it. There's more and more content out there. There's more people like myself running games. There's more people who are looking, and there's definitely more people looking for games than there is people looking to run games. That's kind of always been true, but at the moment, it's insane. There's so many people who are either actively trying to find a group nearby, or they are intrigued and have been intrigued for a while, or they've heard about somebody kind of, talking about it at great lengths and saying how much they've enjoyed themselves. Yeah. So many of the people that come and start or do one of the beginner workshops or something I run occasionally, they say, "Oh, I've always been interested in this. I've been interested in this for years." And there is literally no better time to get into it than now. There's just so many great opportunities and content and things out there. It's pretty exciting.
One of the big turning points for me was not turning points, I suppose, for like from when I realised what it was watching Big Bang Theory.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, and to be fair, like I mean, the last few seasons of it, I've faded away from it. But like with that, I don't know if you've watched much of it, but it was quite nice to see so many categorically nerdy things being brought into it's interesting, it's cool, it's like it's what you make of it. You don't have to be a stereotype to like these things.
I think that's it. And at the end of the day, Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop systems in general are kind of either, if they're not built upon these cliches and things that they exist for a reason, we enjoy them. They are quite often is because they're the originator of these. They're kind of where these cliches have come from. So if you kind of like your fantasy adventure sort of things, it comes in so many different flavors. I run horror, mystery, kind of grand sort of Lord of the Rings epic style things. If you want to play a group of like seedy mercenaries, then we can do that. So many different opportunities to get into.
That's one thing I didn't realize with the fact that it's like like because you told me before, like you can go like down the sci-fi route, you can go down any route you want, and like you say, with it being just storytelling, you can be whoever you want. It hasn't got to be. I think there's a big not stigma, because that's like a very strong word, but there's a big thing that it's just goblins and orcs and wizards and that's it. Like, but like it blew my mind.
Big part of it, but there are other systems, and there are incredibly well established systems. So if you're into Star Wars, like there is multiple Star Wars systems which work well with one another. Star Trek as well. There's established worlds like The Witcher, more popular than ever now after the more recent game and the series as well. It has its own role-playing system, but even if you didn't want to get into that role-playing system, you could theme a world yourself, like the world of The Witcher, and use Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Because it is a rule set. You can do sci-fi in the sort of 5th edition rule set if you wish to. So you can mix and match. You can choose a rule set that fits your sensibilities of either I want detailed, hardcore gaming, and like I want to be tracking the psychological effects that all of this bloodshed has had on my character, versus I want a cheap hack and slash with very little rules, and I want it to be versus I want something that is practically no rules, and is more just about how the characters interact with one another. I want it to be kind of practically more dating sim than sort of a hardcore gaming experience. So there's so many opportunities. I mean, I don't just run Dungeons and Dragons as well. I've been running Starfinder, which is kind of a best way to describe it is like I don't want to use the word generic, but it's not an established world, if that makes sense, outside of itself. So it's not kind of linked to any film or book franchise other than that is created for itself. But it can be mixed into those other things, and it's just a vast world of possible sort of space opera, space horror, kind of sci-fi style stuff. And coming up, we've got Cyberpunk Red. So Cyberpunk 2077, which is the highly awaited next game by CD Projekt Red, is based on a tabletop role-playing game, much like Dungeons & Dragons.
Oh, really?
The latest edition, Cyberpunk Red, is out. It'll be out when it's out, but I'm kind of fingers crossed it's out next month. So that will be one of the other systems that I'll be running for people. So on one side, I'll be running, like elves, goblins, bugbears, that kind of thing. Dragons and stuff like that. And on the other side, it will be sort of picking up an automatic pistol and hopping into a car and racing around the streets of Night City. So it's completely different theme, different stories, different kind of storytelling methods. It should be pretty good.
It must be mad being in your head. Like, do you like see all the worlds and all the different where's your inspiration, man?
Well, I take inspiration from literally anywhere, and I know like whenever anybody asks that question, like that's the canned response of like I see this inspiration wherever I look. No, it's true. I mean, I had a session recently where so a character that had been introduced to just one of the characters in the party via a little side quest that they did. So I do this thing on occasion where kind of between stories aspects, I will role play in text with one of the characters of something that happened. So they can still roll dice and things. It's all done digitally. And they had been introduced to a character. and this was over a year ago. I had to go back and find the messages between us to just double check and read up on what I'd said and make sure I knew how it was. And then this character showed up 2 weeks ago in their main campaign, totally out of the blue. And the character inspiration for this, and bear in mind, this is a high fantasy. They are in a world where there's giants and dragons and kind of all these crazy, wonderful things. And then you have this character, and he is an elf, sorcerer. So immediately you've got this kind of conjured image of like flapping robes of the wind and a big staff or something like that, and kind of lightning crackling everywhere. But no, he has a wide-brimmed hat. He has kind of a shawl over one shoulder, and he has two wands. They both have names, which I never actually got to mention yet, so keep that for later. Has two wands, and he's basically a cowboy. And so we had a little diversion from the main campaign where this guy shows up, and we just got to do like all of these wonderful Western tropes. Sort of like the music changed, because I've got music and things playing in the background. The music changed. He got to introduce himself in a sort of suave manner, and at the same time, we got to kind of play around with kind of the little Western cliches and things for a little bit, because why not? Like, it's our world. We get to decide what it is. There's no Wild West in this particular world that we know of, because we're kind of bombing around a particular area at the moment. But in the same way that like people presume, based on films and things like that, that all pirates have this kind of Cornish accent, all dwarves have a Scottish accent, etc. Something. Like, they don't have to. No. We could have a character with like a fixed set Russian accent. And there's no Russia in this world. No. So this accent doesn't matter where they got it from, doesn't matter what they're doing. So we can pull wherever we like into our worlds. And as a DM, I get to, when I say I take inspiration from anywhere I like, it's because I know I can do whatever I like. Yeah. And likewise, the characters. You hold the power, man. 100%. But some of the inspiration is previous stories and things I've written. I'm pulling from stuff like I've done over a decade ago, like story concepts I never wrote, but then part of that will get kind of chopped up and shoehorned into a new kind of plot thread going off somewhere. Some of it is literally made up on the spot. It's kind of just pang of inspiration and I run with it, and then it ends up being like a major plot point 6 months on. Sometimes
that's crazy. So just going back to like when you were describing that cowboy, mate, I was captivated. So, I was like, I want to know more about this geezer. Tell me more. I was hooked. And like, that's you in like second gear, as far as I'm aware.
Oh yeah. My name's Peter. I've not from around these parts. You could do quite a lot with sort of like character voices and things like that. Well, that was a shit example, but you could do a lot with character voices and things. But I'm narrating, so I'm describing everything around everybody at the same time. People are able to. I could describe broadly what they see, and I have a sort of. I'll kind of roughly describe the room, describe one or two elements of it, mentioning things like what it smells like, kind of feeling that they get. Sort of imagination is a big part of it, and I think one of the things is if we focus too much on what is actually there, we lose what might be there. So I will sometimes describe what they think things might be, and then they can go prodding a little bit further. They can say like, well, you mentioned a desk, and I might have described the desk, but they might want to take a close look to either looking for something, or intrigued by the description. So it's a mixture of like, here's some scene setting, here's some important information, here's some sort of thematic delivery, and whether that's characters or places or events that are happening, you just end up building up over time. And then you combine that with like combat as well is another thing. We could sit down and I could sit with one character sheet and you could sit with another character sheet, And I could say, okay, I'll attack you with the sword, roll some dice, that does 2 points of damage, and then you say something back that I attack you with this axe, etc. And we can go back and forth like that, and we would get functionally the same stuff done.
Yeah.
But if we add in that kind of combat dialogue, kind of running out, shouting over to people, kind of describing how the axe swings, how it kind of rends through the armor, embeds it into the chest, and there's this as you kind of pull it out.
Yeah.
And you see kind of blood slicking off the end of the blade, and you watch this kind of weakened creature in front of you just stagger slightly forwards, almost dropping to their knees, but kind of one great big sort of huff of energy managed to kind of bring themselves up again, now more enraged than ever. There's a sort of a feeling you can invoke with players, especially, so that when things are tough, it kind of looks that way, it feels that way. People get into it. People have said like heart rate goes up, like getting, adrenaline starts kicking in, etc. We just sat around a table talking.
Yeah,
there's nothing.
That's it's incredible though, mate. That's a talent. I mean, you're lucky enough that you were born with the voice and the mind, but like to put it all together. Because I mean, the first time I met you, I think was when you and Bethan came over like after we had like a party at the studio, I think, and I think that was like the first proper time we actually got to chat and not just be like in passing. And after you left, me and my missus was just like, he's captivating. Like honestly, without sounding like I'm in love with you, but it was just like you could talk about anything or describe anything, and everyone in the room just kind of goes, "Tell me more.
Thank you.
Tell me more." And
I think there's always been an element of storytelling. Is something I've been. I don't know if it's something I don't know. I guess part of it comes from my parents. They're both great storytellers in their own ways. I've kind of taken the bits from those that I've liked, and I've heard the same. I think we've all had this, like especially with close families, you hear the same stories told over and over again, and embellished and kind of changed for the audience. And I think both of my parents are pretty good at that, and so I've definitely taken from the two of them. I read like crazy when I was younger. I still do. Like there's moments where I'll stop for a few weeks, but some weeks I'll get through like 2 or 3 books. That's when I'm really going for it. Every night I'll be reading out loud, and then as soon as my partner drifts off to the sound of my boring, monotonous tones, which has not been literally a couple of pages, I'm like, great, she's out. And
I think that's a bit of a compliment, though, mate. That's a compliment. Like, as much as it's kind of an insult because she's not captivating, I suppose. But it's good. Like, people pay a lot of money for things like that, mate.
Well, it's come up a few times. Like, have you ever thought about doing one of those like sleep wave style things?
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm too much of a perfectionist with stuff like that. I mean, even now, I'm slurring over some words and not pronouncing things correctly. And I've done a little bit of like audio recording, a little bit of voice work in the past, and we'd love to get into that more. I really would. Yeah. But again, I'm shooting up here, and I haven't really haven't got the chops for it. I need to do more. In fact, I've actually spent the last few weeks looking around at is there voice acting classes anywhere in Lincoln? Is there anything like that? I haven't found anything. I haven't got the money for it, so I don't know what I'm going to do if I do find it. But I would love to expand my kind of repertoire of voices a little bit. And but we're looking at improv as well. Improv, I think, is a key skill for certainly for being able to kind of make stuff up. I think I'm pretty good at being able to take a story in a direction, or to be able to support a story that's been taken in a direction rather rudely by the players. Tear my notes up and throw those over my shoulder.
Have a diva strap and walk out and go, finish it yourself.
It's normally I'm able to kind of buy time a little bit, or I know the world well enough. I know how the characters that I've placed in there would react to a situation that I haven't prepared for. Or I know that, okay, they've decided to go west rather than, the way they ought to go. That's fine, because I've either planned for it, because I try to plan for a good number of eventualities, or I know what lies to the west. So, and if I don't, I'm pretty good at making stuff up that isn't going to come back and bite me later.
Yeah. I like the idea that it's like a professional blagger as well.
Oh yeah, honestly, like if someone said like, what's your main skill? Like bullshitting. 100%. That's what I do. Like, it's like, oh, you always sound like you know what you're talking about. Like that's the thing. I always sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like
again, having a strong voice helps with that, doesn't it? Just being yeah.
I did have someone. Well, I was playing a game recently, and someone said, "Just because you sound confident doesn't mean I believe you."
That's quite good. That's sensible. I'm the sort of person that, like, you know, if Morgan Freeman told me a completely made up fact, I'd be like, yeah, cool. Morgan Freeman said it, so that's right.
Yeah, I imagine my partner Bevan's like, she's cotton on to this now, and it's actually becoming more difficult, but have a knack for saying things with a straight face.
Yeah.
Just them being not too normalized, like slightly outlandish, but not to the point where it couldn't be possible. And I'll admit, like, she's got me a few times now, so it's either it's rubbed off or like we've just set the bar that high that it's back and forth now. But just bullshitting. It's a key skill, and also like being able to keep a straight face through some things, especially with like character delivery. I think there's a few moments where I would love to just be a player rather than a DM. I would love to be sat on the receiving side of it. And the very few times I do get to play, I actually have to stop myself. Not from backseat DMing, not from saying, actually, that should be this, etc. I don't give a shit about that. I just want a good story.
Yeah.
But from kind of just reacting too much, because I don't get time to react with anything with my own character.
Yeah.
So, I find it hard sometimes to kind of deliver something that's kind of important. He'll know who he is. I shouted at one of my players recently because I've been trying to push some of the characters a little bit further, just trying to kind of voices, be a bit more enigmatic. And we've had this character that's been waiting in the wings for quite some time. And it was one of those, they'll get to him in their own time, or they will find a means of initiating this conversation.
Yeah.
And the character got their time at their first time in a year and a half or so of being hunted down to actually speak to the party, or at least speak to one of the people in the party for the first time. And something was said, and he responded with anger, and I genuinely shat myself after I shouted, because I was sort of that was too much. But no, it went well. Like, it had the desired effects. We're still friends. It definitely. I think it helped being able to kind of push it that far. It's something I'm trying to do more for other characters. Not find a reason to shout, but it delivers a stronger moment.
Like,
so
having that real personality to the characters, then.
Yes, yeah, and like I had to. The difficult part for me was I didn't want to stop the session. I didn't want to kind of like break character and say, shit, sorry, you okay? But yeah, it's one of those things where I think the better delivered certain characters are, and that goes for the players as well. We've had some genuine heart-to-heart moments between kind of all the people, and this is where that sort of cooperative, collaborative storytelling comes in. Everybody is equally responsible for delivering their character, delivering the story in a manner that is enjoyable to us all. And I think if anyone was to sit in the room from beginning to finish, they would find it enjoyable too.
Yeah.
They would be able to understand the in-jokes. They would be able to reminisce about moments, even though they personally weren't part of it. Kind of best. We're not either. Like, we really down to it. We're not actually doing those things.
Yeah.
But we are orchestrating them. We are deciding that these are the things that we want to at least attempt to do. And if they pull off, they pull off. We've, the crazy close calls, the sort of horrible moments where someone's been lost or where failure has been inevitable. The sort of those crazy moments that you only see in films, which have been elaborately scripted, are amazing when you don't go into a session with a script. I barely go into a session with a script. The players certainly don't. And then you add the dice rolls on top of that. And if you get that kind of amazing heist moment where everything gets pulled off at the end, or that kind of climactic boss fight or something, then surely that's even more amazing, because it wasn't a given. Like, if you've ever watched an adventure film or an action film or some sorts, and you go into this fight thinking like, wow, they're really on the ropes, but we know that they're going to win.
Yeah.
Because it's a rare film, or it's a rare book. Protagonist is like, oh, it looks like they're going to die, and then they just die. But that happens in D&D. It happens in tabletop. So when you do pull through, when you do get to the end, that's an actual achievement. That's how it feels.
Yeah.
So the things that you do are earned in this kind of crazy hobby. And I think that's why people are willing to put time and effort into it. I mean, I do charge for games, not all of them, obviously, because I've got friends and other people that are playing in campaign groups, and you're not going to suddenly start charging them. But people are happy to put money into that. Mostly, I think, because you look at the price of a cinema ticket these days, and I'm charging less than that for twice the amount of time. And yes, it's on a weekly basis, but you actually get to be an active part of that. Yeah. It's a difficult thing to imagine if you've never done it before, which is why I try and run these like little free one-shot sort of things, little adventures, etc. And the dream, because I have plenty, is that eventually there will be some sort of publicly accessible stream or podcast or something where I will have the right group, the right adventure, and the right level of confidence to be able to publicly put something out there so that other people can watch and read and work along with us. And so that, I do have certain standards that I think have got me this far and I would like to continue with. Yeah. It wouldn't be made for an audience, but it would be made with knowledge that there's an audience watching. And so we're not going to sit around a table and say like, okay, remember, you've got to say this and you've got to do this, etc. It will be the raw experience of they don't know what's going to happen. I'm the only one with any sense of what's going to happen, and the dice are going to mess it all up for us all anyway. So
could you see like your stories like translating to like books or films or anything like that, or
if I took some of the campaigns that I've run and tried to translate them into book format, I think any publisher worth their salt would just like take a quick read for it, tear out huge chunks of pages and throw them in the fire. Because that's a lot of, I wouldn't say it's filler, but
it would be in them formats.
Like the most, like they are the some of these moments are absolutely brilliant, and I feel like we'd be lost without them. They're kind of like the Tom Bombadil moments of sort of D&D as far as these campaigns are concerned. Like, there's some real diehards out there, like, we love these moments, but it doesn't make the film. So there's moments that, like, in retrospect, you look back and you think, okay, from a plot perspective, did anything actually change? And the answer is no. It's like, so why did we do it? At the time, you don't have that level of choice. And sometimes there doesn't need to be consequences. There just needs to be fun, or there needs to be some storytelling. I will have sessions where, like, the group goes around purchasing things. That's it. The shopping episode.
The weekly shop.
There's none of that in, like, any sort of epic thing. Like, can you imagine, like, the sort of a 40-minute section of a Star Wars film where, like, they go to the market and they just, purchase supplies and things for the road. It's like, and one of the shopkeepers is really interesting and, like, he's got a funny voice and stuff like that, and we all had a bit of a laugh. But at the end of the day, does it need to be in the film? So I would like to think that there were sections of the campaign that I think would make for interesting stories. And people share these all the time. If you go to the forums, and if you ever need convincing, and I'm very careful. I try not to convince people like, "Hey, you should come and do a session," sort of thing, because it's basically like pushing drugs on somebody.
Yeah. It will be with me, genuinely.
Yeah.
I know it will.
Like, oh, hey, this is so good. I've got people coming, and they want to do this like 4 hours a week, every week, that sort of thing. Like, I'll try not to push it in that way, because it is what it is. People are interested or people aren't interested, and there's more interested people than, generally speaking, dungeon masters and games masters can collaboratively cater for. So we've got no shortage of audience. It's more about, are you available at certain times? Do you have the means to kind of get here, etc., sort of thing. So it's more of a logistics issue.
Yeah.
However, the people who are not sure if they're interested in something a bit more, head to the forums and look for things like sort of interesting stories, or like moments in campaign. Reddit has a lot of interesting subreddits I browse frequently and submit stuff to. Or just hit me up directly and I'll share stories as well, I'm sure. But people share these like little golden moments, and the worst part of it is some of them just won't make sense. Some of them won't. They won't scan, because it's almost like a private joke. It's like, that moment where like you meet up with friends and you go for a night out and this crazy thing happened and it was absolutely amazing. You just absolutely have to share it. You share it with somebody, and about partway through you realize
you really had to be there.
You kind of had to be there.
Yeah.
So when you say like, oh, there's this moment, and so anyway, we'd got into this like dragon's lair, and we're about halfway down, and I forgot about, there's this goblin, and his name was Droop, and so we kind of rescued him. He was like the only survivor from such and such, and then you just realize that there's so much context of like a year's worth of stuff. That's at this point. You need to know how people's characters are and everything. It's like people that quote sections of films that make sense in the film, but they don't. In isolation, it's just funny noise to everybody else.
You just leave people looking really confused and like, okay, mate, you do you.
So there's some brilliant stories out there, but like selecting the ones that would kind of work in a written format or kind of a filmed format, and that don't require kind of previous viewing. And there's some amazing like Dungeons and Dragons and similar podcasts and shows and streams out there. And I will sit and watch highlights of these, at the end of the day, really. And there's something in common I found with them, which is, oh, this is hilarious. This is a really great moment, but it's great because I watched the whole thing. Like I was a participant in so much that I was a member of the audience. And so I'm reminiscing more than I'm actually kind of watching this cold and thinking that's hilarious, or that's amazing, or that's a real tearjerker, etc. So,
So what sort of thing? What got you into like D&D in the first place?
I was expecting this question, and so I thought I better think of an answer.
If it's not interesting, it's not interesting. Is it just something that just happened, or
a lot of the books I used to read when I was a kid, because I used to read a lot, were either fantasy or sci-fi. I just loved other worlds, and actually, it's kind of a twofold thing. I think my auntie dropped off some books, and I can't remember where it came from. Pretty early on, I remember I had Hero Quest, which is just getting re-released actually, which is a kind of a board game. It's kind of D&D sort of themed, based, etc., with like, barbarian and a wizard, etc., and you actually get to kind of play them out in terms of their stats and what they can do. It's like a real simplified board game version of Dungeons and Dragons. And then I remember having access to, I'd love to know where this went, but one of the AD&D books, which is the second edition of Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
That's right. And so I had like all of the kind of component pieces there. I had like a kind of slightly more kind of child-friendly when you haven't got anyone to teach you how to do these things. Child-friendly kind of gateway into something where I could play with my sister or a few friends or something. I had a book that I was able to read through. I had an interest in things like Warhammer and stuff like that. So like this kind of numbers, dice rolling base game with a story behind it. And then, other than kind of being interested in fantasy and sci-fi, I have, if I was to chalk up anything to my love of not just so much D&D, but running these things, is I love world building. It's one of my. You asked earlier, like, do I see these things in my head? Yes, 100%. I didn't realize that other people don't do this to the same extent that I do, but I can come up with something and I can physically see it. Like, I can turn it around in my head. I can zoom in on bits. I can add levels of detail, etc. If I had any artistic capability, I'm sure that would be a real boon. But so what I have is I have a very vivid image. And when people say, like, oh, you're fantastic at kind of coming up with concepts and describing things, I'm just telling you what I see. It's just that I'm the only one that can see it. So it's basically like anything from the group say, like, oh, I want to see if there's like an inn nearby. It's like, sure, there's an inn. I give it a name off the top of my head or from a pre-prepared list of things I've got. And if it's not like a notable enough location, I'll describe the inside of this inn. And already that inn has, I don't know, let's just do one now. Like, the Golden Torch. You go in, it's like a set of two thin, slim kind of wooden doors with like large kind of black handles on the front. They kind of open inwards and they're sort of peaked at the top. And as you head in, there's a wooden staircase. It's on your left-hand side, just in front of you. And it kind of corners off up the room at a slightly weird angle. There's lots of like little wooden barrels and things tucked underneath it. It's quite dark. And the namesake of the inn is because in the very center, where you would expect there to be a chandelier, there is in fact just one large golden torch just hanging there magically in the air. The bar is a little offset front right towards you, and there's maybe space for 2 or 3 round tables, a mismatched kind of selection of chairs and stools and things. On the wooden floor, you hear kind of a heavy scrape as one moves back, and you see someone kind of heading towards the bar, where there is an elven woman already kind of tending to a dwarf, sat on one of the highest stools at the bar itself. And as you kind of walk in, you get this slightly kind of day-old pungent aroma of staled ale that you can tell is they've made some effort to try and cover it up. There's what looks to be sort of herbs or some sort of dried flowers and things that have been placed on each of the tables. This is an inn that has tried to establish itself as a nicer place, but has got very little to work with. And yeah, you can, depending on what the party's there for, you can kind of accentuate certain details in some fashion or another. And you can, but I can map the place out in my head instantly.
Mate, sign me up. Like is that something you've like? Is that from one of your campaigns, or is that?
No, that's just me.
You just
bullshitting. That bullshit skull.
Jesus Christ!
But the second I kind of like, I can imagine walking through the door and looking around and piecing all of this together. It means that when somebody asks for something, I'm not having to like make something up and remember what I've said. I just go back to that same place. And
it's a bit like Sherlock's Mind Palace. That's sort of like,
it's more like, rather than Sherlock's Mind Palace, it's like Suitably Odd's head hut.
I like that. I must admit, I mean, I'm very much like that with my creative stuff, and especially because obviously I'm from a construction background originally. So like when I'm trying to like think about, components going together and this, that, and the other, I do very much visualize it, but because I haven't got the level of ability to like describe it, it's so I'm very much like, I'll just show you, right, and I'll get something. So I'm very much, I think I'm on the similar wavelength to you, but I don't think I've got that level of like, I can imagine going in somewhere and sort of roughly describing it, but I don't think I could really portray what I can see it, but I can't tell you much about it.
I'm jealous of, because again, if I could draw or do something that was more visual, I could just, okay, here you go. And I can't do that during session, but I can either through pre-planning, or I can do it in other kind of aspects of life where, if I'm designing a coat or something, like I've got it in my head, I know what it needs to look like, but I can't draw it, but I can describe it. Well,
Yeah.
if you've ever gone to a tailor or gone to someone who's creative in any capacity, who's like, "Hi, I'd like a shirt, please." Like, what would you like it to look like? Well, I want it to be kind of, evocative of this particular sort of theme. Like, imagine, like, say the apocalypse has happened, but it wasn't that long ago, and like whoever is wearing this shirt has just like they're looking for new opportunities, and it's got like double cuffs, I think. Like some sort of like flowery palette. Like I could sort of like see it in my head, but describing it and describing how I wanted to function. And one of the things I guess I'm a bit more known for is I like things to be practical. So I have these fantasy worlds where things have a degree of logical sense behind them. Like gravity is still a thing, and there are certain aspects where like you just hand wave it, like magic. But I like the players to be able to feel like, okay, they get how this world works, because it's not actually that different from our own. Aside from like the mysterious creatures and all the magic and stuff. But they should feel like the default response for anything is, oh, I know that if something goes up, it generally comes down, and so they feel like they can work with that. And that applies to things like, okay, you go into a tavern, and from a scene setting perspective, there's the bartender, there's tables and chairs and things like that. But like, how does food work? Is just one person work there? Are there other people? Do they work in shifts, etc.? And these are all sorts of things that, if that is somehow important to the story or important to a player's kind of perspective of that place, or perhaps they just keep coming back to the same place and you want to shake things up, there is a logical reason for it. It's not just a case like, oh, there's someone different at the bar because I forgot whoever worked here beforehand. So there's some degree of kind of underlying logic. And I found, even with like visual descriptions, I will put in little aspects of things that kind of just make sense. The sort of thing that we're normally blind to. And so the best way I can describe it is I can physically see this thing in my mind. And so I have the same issue. Like, I'm blind to all of the stuff on my desk around me that is always there, that is essential. But actually, if you were completely new to the situation, and this situation involves a fantasy world where not everything is normal, etc., then these normal aspects are the things that I'm going to just gloss over. I'm going to forget about. I found if I start to describe them, then it makes sense. So I've had a session recently where the party wanted to see if there was any mail for them. Well, we're in a fantasy world, but it's a fantasy world with like limited technology. And so they, like month or so ago, said to various people, hey, we're going to this city. And so when they get to that city, there has to be some means of them collecting mail. Well, they don't have an address there. So how do they collect mail? And then immediately I'm thinking, okay, so there's a sorting office of some sort, and they go to the sorting office and they say, hey, have you got any messages for such and such? How do they know to give them that mail or not? Like, there's not like a national ID, right?
Have you got your goblin identity card?
Like, like they're not going to suddenly sort of flash, they don't need like two forms of identification. Like, so we have this situation where I think we've all been to like the post office to pick up a parcel that, we got a red slip for, sort of thing. How does that work when all they have is which city you're going to be in and which name it is? And so is it a trust basis? And so you start to think, shit, I haven't got an answer for this. But I feel like there should be, because when they go to this posting office and they say, I don't want to just hand wave it and say, okay, so you get to the city and you collect your mail. It would be easy to do that. And I don't think we're really lacking anything, but actually they had to find a sorting office. They go there, they stand in line, they wait. And I'm not going to make them do all this, but it gives them the sense that this is a working city with rules and logic and things that they haven't anticipated. So they have to kind of utilize their own logic and rules and understanding to be able to work with that. And I'm not going to blindside them with like, oh, you should have known that, I don't know, there's a magical albatross that delivers the mail, and I don't know, it works on scent or something like that. And you didn't bring flower from your homeland so we can properly identify you. That's bullshit. It should be something that they, as players, understand in advance. And so, I try to kind of add a degree of logic into a very illogical world.
And I suppose it becomes quite dull if it's just like, well, there's a spell for that. There's a potion for that.
Yeah.
This doesn't work because magic. And like you can use it as a tool, but I think if you just do, if that's just the go-to, it's
There has to be a balance.
Okay.
Yeah. The balance has to not take away from like the fantastical nature of the world that you're working in.
Yeah.
But it also has to kind of make sense that you know sometimes magic isn't all that capable. Magic has its own limitations, and the same is 100% true for sci-fi genre stuff as well. Like I've been researching and writing stuff for Cyberpunk Red when it comes out. And so we have this gritty, like sci-fi noir city that people are going to be able to run around in, where like the line between what is a crime and what isn't is kind of weirdly quite fine. And so there's a lot of what's Mike Pondsmith, the writer behind Cyberpunk Red, has added into it that just makes logical sense. There are aspects of it which are kind of like, yeah, this is the crazy future, and there's aspects where this, this is logical. This makes sense. There has to be a reason why this is how it is. Yeah. And you, as players, need to be able to understand that this is the case. You will get to have these epic moments, but those epic moments feel more epic when they're on a background of difficulty, when there is an aspect of, yes, there's rules to this shit. You can't just say, oh, I fly up into the air and kill everyone in the room sort of thing. That might be cool. But you just can't say you do that. However, if you can manage to find a way of pulling that off, that's do it. Like, seeing people kind of like wipe out entire rooms of people or manage to convince the unconvincible in some respects, and do some pretty amazing things. But they're so amazing because they were actually difficult. And hats off to them. That's what we're here for. We're looking for those opportunities where people are pushing their characters into a new level of achieving things, really.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Like, honestly, like the whole of this, even like your little descriptions on that, I'm just like, I can't commit. But to be fair, I mean, we have been talking about for the Utopia project, seeing about doing, because we want to do more vocational stuff, like sort of in the new year. So it might be worth having a bit of a chat and seeing about us coming down and filming. I suppose that gives you a bit of an outlet as well. I mean, I can't imagine it'd be overly serious, but like doing some sort of one shot or something. But we're definitely like, we've spoke about it. So I mean, I'm hoping that isn't my first jacking up of D&D heroin and lost, selling my family to.
You can kind of, you set some boundaries around it. So with a campaign, you're playing in it for the long haul. Like when we develop the characters, we do a thing called Session Zero, so that it's almost like an informal chat where we understand the boundaries of what it is we're doing. And this is where it does begin to sound more like a sex thing, but where everybody gets their safe words. But we understand how it works, what's expected, etc., without it being kind of too much, too little. But we really kind of set what it is we want to do going into this. And then as we begin to go into it, there's this understanding that this is a progressive thing. We might spend 2 or 3 sessions in a row with no combat. It might just be pure roleplay and exploration. There might be a moment where we start a big fight and 2 sessions later we finish that big fight. Because you just kept getting wave of enemies, or maybe that's just how you played it out. So it ebbs and waves. Whereas a one shot, this kind of one-off adventure, I would try to deliver a little bit of everything, or at the very least, I try to deliver within a kind of more specified thing. So no, you're not going to get opportunities to develop your character in the same way you are for a campaign. You're not going to get these character arcs of they started this way, they ended this way, kind of thing, because you've got 4 hours of gameplay time. You're not going to be able to delve into your kind of personal backstory about how your parents were killed in a fire and you were brought up on the hard streets, etc. As like I'm sure 60% of player characters are. And so you don't get those opportunities, not really anyway. Instead, what you get is a tight-knit adventure of, oh, hey, we're here to play a kind of Indiana Jones-esque tomb raiding adventure where there's a secret beneath the sands, and we're going to head on down there and see if we can pull it out.
Yeah.
You know what the objective is going in. Your characters are prepped for it, and we just hit the ground running. We go into it. And so that might thematically be a horror style thing. It might be a comedy style thing. It might be something with... but it has specific aims, basically. We try and deliver on that. Most of the time we succeed. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't get to the end because we've only got a definitive amount of time.
Yeah.
Last year I ran a Halloween special that ran to 3 sessions. So that's really? My bad. I think it's 4 hours of content, 12 hours later. So it happens. But it was fantastic. Everybody wanted more, so it was great. We delivered on it. This year's Halloween special, I'm actually utilizing content written by somebody else. So it's called Voyage of the Damned, I think. And it's a kind of horror thing set on the sea. So, we're going to see how that works. So yeah, regardless of what it is you're running, there's always going to be with those one-shot adventures. There's kind of like a little cap. So it's not one of these cases of like, if you want to see how this turns out, you've got to come back next week. No, it's very much a case of like, yep, that's it. That's its own isolated thing. And as a result, it means that we can play around with stuff. We can be a bit crazy with the characters because we don't have to make them sustainable. We don't have to see them kind of run on year after year. We can play around with themes. We can play around with mechanics. That Halloween special for last year, I don't know if I should say this because I might be running again at some point. Screw it. One of the players was the bad guy. The whole time, and kind of gets to do the big reveal at the end, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I ran a one shot for somebody's birthday where it was basically just the Crystal Maze. So the group have been kind of magically teleported to this place. It was called the Emerald Lambert, and they did various little kind of mini quest sort of adventures, skill checks and things like that in order to be able to collect these green emeralds and then take them to the dome to effectively fight for their life. Better version of the Crystal Maze now I think about it. We can do some crazy stuff with that kind of format, really.
Yeah, definitely. So while I've got you, because we're like 1 minute, 1 hour 20 now. So this is the problem with these chats. I think I would love to do them for like hours on end, but generally, like it's time generally. But like I'm trying to keep all the episodes to like an hour and a half, and like I'm like, I want to keep talking, and like me and you have had a few conversations that was just like thought were going to be 10-minute chats and ended up being like 2 hour long. But while I have got you as well, two things I wanted to talk to you about was obviously your Tavern. Tavern room, and obviously what you're doing with like Patreon. I can never say it right.
So I'll do the Patreon thing first. We're kind of in a bit of a hiatus at the moment, and that's all my fault for being busy / boring and relaxing and not doing any work. But Beth and I, we produce some digital maps which can be utilized by other DMs, GMs, etc. for fantasy games. They are in kind of one of Bethan's nice little art styles. It's a good mix between it being... I am quite picky with stuff, obviously. Especially doing this as a job now, I have to kind of look at quality things. I don't like the idea of just like, oh, hey, everybody, thanks for coming, spending the 4 hours with me, and then I slap down a piece of paper and just roughly draw a map on it. I like to obviously prepare things in advance and have things that are set. So I have hundreds of maps stored in various forms, but I'm pretty choice about them. And so by producing our own, we get the kind of quality we're looking for. And normally that is... a mix of colorful, easy to kind of determine what things are, good kind of perspective, and also good layout. So many maps, nice, but actually when you're running an encounter on them, like a fight, I want to see some stuff like verticality. I want to see like difficult ground, gaps in things, barriers, stuff to take cover behind, and things like that, without it seeming like a paintball arena. I wanted to look natural, but at the same time, there's some thought put into it. So, yes, we produce those, and people can actually download them for free They every time we produce a map, Suitably Odd's Facebook page will put a message out, and we haven't done one for a little while, but we're going to be getting back onto it soon because there's actually a couple in stock that I just haven't put online yet.
Yeah.
To say I am the at fault there. There is so there's a few of those. They're all available for free in a particular format. However, if you support us through Patreon, for as little as £1 per map, and you can actually set how many maps you want per month to support. So if you just want to support us for £1 a month, then you will get access to additional collections within those. So, for instance, we'll have a map, but then we'll have that map, but at night, or we'll have that map, but it's been taken over by a demonic cult, or that map plus like it'll come in a gridded format. So if you want the grid on it, so you can just print it or run it online via an online system, then it's good to go. Or if you want it without the grid on, that's good as well. We do prop packs, so we'll have like a map, and then we'll take all of the chairs and tables and things out of that map, and we'll put them in as individual images. So if you wanted to then start rearranging the furniture how you like, you can do that too. If you wanted to just take those props and use them in another map that someone else has made or that you've made, do it as well. If you want to add them into one of those systems, you could do that too. So starting for as little as £1 a month, you can support us, and that enables us to genuinely, because we haven't got that many supporters, because we've not really been pushing it that much, and I've been sat on the maps like an idiot. Then the more support we get through that specifically, the more maps we could do, because our time is limited, and it means that we can spend more time doing that. Bethan is the illustrator behind all the maps. I literally, my job is literally to just put the mud line and how long that takes. And also to kind of like be the DM, kind of like, oh, hey, you know, I do this as a job, but these are the maps that, you know, I've helped design and that sort of thing, etc. But so we've only just started this process. We're finding our feet a bit. We'll get there eventually. And any support feedback is always useful for that. So that's the Patreon side of things. Also, you can support us on there just because you like us. That's the option. It's one of those, like, if you feel like, hey, I want to keep this crazy thing that this guy's doing going, then Patreon is an option too. Sure, why not? I appreciate literally everything that anybody does towards that. Which brings me on to the Tavern. We have a Tavern project, which I think I can. So it's called The Wanderer's Way. The Wanderer's Way is a tavern with a little bit of a background story behind it. That way I won't get into it, but it's basically a fancy tavern that shows up when people need it. It shows up in different worlds. It's always looks different. It's run by different people. Potentially, it's basically a tavern that you can put in your own world. There's literally nothing behind it other than this concept of this tavern ties together narratives. And so adventurers may be finding themselves walking along the trail, cold, hungry. They find this little tavern in the middle of nowhere, which doesn't make any kind of economic or decent business sense. But they head on in, and there's a warm meal waiting for them, a drink, and there are other adventurers, and they can swap tales with them. And that was the background idea behind. I wanted to create a place, initially a digital kind of online place, where people from different groups, people with different characters, can join and swap stories, knowing full well that in their world this doesn't exist, and in their world this exists. And for this to be a magical mystery place where actually there doesn't have to be a combined storyline, it's aside from everything else. That place, it runs on a Discord server called The Oddology. Again, details are on my Facebook page for Suitably Odd. And anyone is welcome to join and talk about literally anything. There's channels for pretty much anything. Just want to join and play computer games with people on there because they seem like decent people, and they are, then do so. If you just want to share pictures of cats, do so. But if you want to talk tabletop, then there's plenty of opportunity. And that's where I announce all of my stuff first, because they're the people putting the time in to kind of follow and stuff like that. So that then became a physical idea. Bethan, as you all know, is she's fucking crazy in the best possible way. In so much that, God, you think like my job is imagination and storytelling and things like that. She makes that a reality and has taught me how to do that in ways that I've never been able to do before. And so we decided we were going to turn one room of our house into a tavern. like a full-blown fantasy tavern, and we're partway there already. So like wooden floors, big chunky kind of table marked and scratched and things, kind of wood cladding, big timbered beams, iron chandelier, roaring fire, keg, kind of dried sausages and meats and things like that hanging down. We have started making so an owlbear is a creature in D&D specifically, and a few other things as well, but it's part owl, part bear, as the name would suggest.
Yeah.
So a stuffed owlbear head that's going to be mounted above the fireplace. Somebody has given us weapons. We've got a sword and a dagger. I think someone mentioned a pike was coming, and so it's getting a small armory going at this point. So there'll be a weapon stand by the door for people to kind of put their things in as well. Yeah. And the whole idea behind this room is it is going to be a room that is going to be available to rent out and utilize as you see fit. It is going to be equipped for tabletop gaming. So running sessions in. All of my personal sessions are running there already. Yeah. These are the ones I run in person, not the ones I run online. They're running there already, so all of the players are starting to see the kind of room coming together. We're going to have like candle lit sconces on the walls and things. It's going to shuttered like windows, crazy door thing. Like the whole thing's going to be fully equipped for it. You obviously have been like amazing at helping us with. We have a digital battle map. Yeah, that we've been sessions on there now, and that is fucking fantastic.
Has it gone down well then? Yeah.
Oh yeah, people love it, and like it's down to me now to kind of figure out like there's certain aspects of it that I would like to use in a different manner.
Yeah,
I would like to be able to kind of do different things of it, but they're all just like digital tech stuff basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fantastic because normally I like to have as much visual aid stuff as possible. And if you've ever tried looking at like what a color prints for A0 costs or A1 or whatever it is, and there's certain limitations to a paper map, which is what I used to use, it's astronomical. And so now I have access to not just all of the digital maps I have kind of lying around already, but I'm using animated maps too. So some amazing creators out there doing these kind of like almost photorealistic sometimes, but these animated maps where the kind of party can kind of have their fights in. The world maps are displayed, all of the kind of visual clues. If they get a letter, it gets displayed on the screen or it gets physically handed to them. So the digital map is going down like a storm. If people want to rent out the room and to run a game in this kind of thematic room, and utilize all of the stuff. So there's a DM's cupboard. It's got tokens. It's got markers, sets of dice, like drinking horns, flagons, all of these cool things for running games in. You get access to all of that. If you want to run just board games in there, we started a small collection of like thematic board games, like fantasy themed board games of varying different difficulties and types. So that'll be stocked up. It will be run as an escape room. So if you want to go in and kind of like go through what will be a pretty puzzle heavy escape room with, from what I've looked at so far, some fairly tricky puzzles to kind of fix, then yes, it'll be that. If you just want to rent it out and have a meal in there, we're doing our fantasy feast, which is our Christmas Day meal. We've done for 2 years in a row now. We're doing that this year as well. So it's going to be kind of packed goods out and big kind of fantasy themed meal. So the room is all coming together, and the idea behind that is so it's a place where I can kind of run my stuff that's in our own home, so I don't have to travel very far. Batshit crazy. We love spending time in there, even if it's just eating a meal or playing a board game between us and stuff. It means that people will be able to rent it out. We have an Airbnb room available, so if you want to do like a weekend where you gather a few people, there's a pub like 2 minutes walk away, not even that, like 60 seconds maybe. You can stay nearby. You can utilize the room for the entire weekend. We're looking partnering up with a local place for things like tavern platters, so we can provide foods and like meats and cheeses and breads. So you can have like anywhere from like, oh, I just want to have it for an hour, to sit and drink a coffee and sure, like I'll just screw it, just let me know, I'll come around for free. Okay, it's available, use it. But if to like spend like a 4-hour session every week running a game in there, or having a game run for you, for playing board games or something like that, the room will be available. So it is like an experience room of sorts.
That's crazy, man.
Eventually, like down the line, there's a hidden sound system I'd like to put in. Because I run atmospheric sounds and music and things during my sessions. I want other people to have the opportunity to do that too. There's going to be a lighting system, so actually kind of hidden in the iron chandelier. So if you want to, like, we're underwater now, so we've got kind of rippling blue water effects going across the table.
That's sick.
Bring it in. It's all planned. We are hoping to launch this as a Kickstarter campaign. Not your typical kind of Kickstarter campaign where it's a case of, here's a fancy gadget that you totally need, and for just 50 quid, you could get one of these in 4 years once we've worked out the quirks of things like it doesn't quite work yet, etc. Or for what I use Kickstarter for, which is like, here's a board game you definitely need. This is going to be, this is just purely assisting us making this room a reality. We have some crazy rewards that we're kind of still in the planning phases with, but we want it to be an opportunity where people can come and utilize this as a room that is not a gaming cafe. It's not kind of a back room of a pub or something like that. It is a thematic room where everything is catered for, and you can come in and just have a really good time there, is what we're trying to sort of promote. We've got a lot of barriers to get across, both legal and otherwise, and things we need to look into. But the great thing about it is it's happening regardless. If all I do is run games there myself, if all it is a room that, the two of us can enjoy, it might take us 4 years to get there, but we're going to get there. But actually hoping maybe prospectively end of next year. We've got the wall cladding in. It's not installed yet. We've got the floors are finished. We've got someone coming around to take a look at ceiling beams, because we've got a few options open for that. We've got someone in mind to help us out with the shuttered windows. There are so many people assisting us with this because it is a crazy but fun idea. We've got so many people to thank, basically. It's going to be... what I would like to think of is it's going to be a nice little highlight spot. I have people who have already said, I'm down in like Kings Lynn, I'm down near London, and I will totally come up for that when it's ready. They're looking for excuses for like a little mini holiday away, where they can run stuff like this or have stuff run for them. So there's definitely a desire for it. So the Patreon money all goes towards supporting the games I run, and the Tavern project as well. So it's kind of equalized across both. So that's our big aim. We'll probably get married as well, and that's meant to be on the cards too.
Congratulations on your engagement, by the way.
Thank you. So that'll be a themed wedding as well, I'm sure. Yeah,
plenty of exciting things to come.
Definitely. It's things are a bit gloomy at the moment, but we've kept ourselves busy, and we're really looking forward to the next year or so. There's a lot of exciting things to happen. I have new campaign groups. They're waiting in the wings. They were meant to be launching in March. Obviously, we had a pandemic, and I can't start them because obviously, we've been on lockdown. I moved all my existing groups online as they've started to come back, but obviously things are still a little bit up in the air. So I don't really want to kick off any other additional groups wholesale just yet. But if people are looking for an opportunity to immerse themselves in a story of their own making, and they've got a few people that they want to do that with, just give me a shout. To say I don't kind of advertise this, it's word of mouth mostly. It's probably the most advertising I've done. But
it all sounds incredible, mate. And obviously, I can't see why it wouldn't be a success, or why this time next year I think you're gonna be flat out even more so than now, aren't you? Really?
Well, I mean, I've got pipe dreams. The Green Dragon in the city is, it has been sat vacant for too long, and I would definitely 100%, if I ever won the lottery, that would be a place I would buy, and I would run as basically our Tavern project, but for an entire pub. That would be my goal.
That would be pretty cool.
I aim high and see what I accomplish, and with all the people assisting, then honestly, I think we'll get somewhere by the end of next year, certainly.
Yeah. Awesome, mate. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. And it's been, like, as usual, incredible talking to you. Yeah.
We talk at length about things I enjoy.
Yeah, no worries, mate. I shall take care and I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Have a good one.
There we go, guys. Another episode done. I hope you enjoyed that chat. Don't forget to check him out. And don't forget to check out all my other stuff, Utopia Project and all that. Tom's got some great stuff coming up as far as I'm aware. Don't forget to check out his stuff. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell and all that. I'll see you in the next episode.